Hey now, everybody. Welcome to Inglet.org. This is Professor Island, and today we are talking about El Teatro Campesino, or actos, or both, because they're related. This actually all centers around this fella right here. This is Luis Valdez, and he was part of activism in San Francisco in the 1960s, mid-1960s to late 1960s, and of course till now, which is a very broad brush. Keep in mind that during the 1960s, we had a great deal of activism by a great number of people, including women's rights, sexual rights, religious rights, anti-war stuff, pro-drug stuff, just a wide range of things. And among the cultural environments that were shouting for attention and respect included a very specific aspect within the Latino culture, and that had to do with the United Farm Workers Union and the press for rights for farm workers. And ultimately, he was a focal point because as a college student and also as a Latino, he was fully aware both the political aspects of it and how to actualize it in a particular way, but he wanted to impact change. A lot of this centered around his loyalty and his adherence to the ideas of Cesar Chavez, who created what originally became the United Farm Workers Union, and what they would do is they would go around to various places where farm workers were working, and during their breaks, not while they were working because that would be a violation, but during their breaks, they could then talk to them about unionizing and trying to get farm workers to be unionized over all kinds of things, including pay, working conditions, living conditions, since many of these campesinos, these farm workers, were not at home. They were either a little far away, like 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 miles away from home, or they were even from Mexico, and we can talk about the Bracero program at another time. But basically, he would go around all these places, and one of the things that Luis Valdez picked up on is that getting people to join something that they feel might jeopardize their job was a problem, and certainly also broadening the understanding of the plight of the farm workers to people outside of the farm worker community was also important, and that's where Luis Valdez kind of got his deal going. One of the things that he did is that he created El Teatro Campesino, which was and still is an activist group whose idea is to spread equal rights and workers' rights, and then later on Latino rights and individual rights as a concept to people. What started out as discussions about farm workers and the rights of these laborers is now a discussion about the individual versus big business and the like. So the work as far as Valdez is concerned is not done. But in the 1960s, of course, what they would do is, along with other people in San Francisco, other activists, including people like Bill Graham, who ended up working with bands like the Grateful Dead and such, and of course Quicksilver Messenger Service, they would have these events, and these events sometimes included a lot of music, as you might get with Quicksilver, but also might include a play and things like that. And that's where El Teatro Campesino really, showed their stuff, along with other groups like the Diggers and the like, from where we get actors like Peter Coyote and people like that all came from these. What they would do is they would go around and they would go from, specifically the El Teatro would go from place to place with a flatbed truck, and while farm workers were working out in the fields, basically, filling their quotas and things like that, they would then get a break, and the flatbed truck would come over and park, and they would put on a little play in front of the folks there in order to try to give them to understand something. And it would be a mixture of Spanish and English, depending on their audience. And very often these very short plays, they had to be 10, maybe sometimes 15 minutes at the most, because that's all the time they had before the supervisor or the foreman would come rushing out there and try to scare them away, try to rush them off. And certainly when they would also perform these actos, this guerrilla activism by theater in San Francisco itself, in Delano, in these other areas surrounding this valley in which all this food is grown, they knew they had a very short period of time before the cops would show up. So they made these very short plays. One of them that we will cover certainly in the Latino literature course is Los Vendidos, but there are others as well, and of course other larger works came from this, including works about the Zoot Suit riots and about famous Latino authors and writers and singers, including Richie Valens. Zoot Suit, of course, was a very important one because it was another political aspect. This actually had to do not with what was going on in San Francisco, but what was going on in Los Angeles. And if you're familiar with Dodger Stadium and you find it to be a lovely place, once in a while you'll hear the phrase Chavez Ravine, and the reason it was called Chavez Ravine is because there was basically an encampment there, some marginally permanent dwellings, but mostly non-permanent dwellings for farm workers who were in the area, and that's where they stayed, was this Chavez Ravine. And eventually the people who wanted to create Dodger Stadium got together with the city. It did the old eminent domain thing, which means we're coming in, we're taking over where you like it or not, and they booted everybody out of there. And as part of that, it created a bit of an issue involving some crime and things like that, and that's what the Zoot Suit movie is and story and play are about, and that's something you might want to investigate. It's an interesting story. The Zoot Suit, by the way, is an actual it's an actual garment. It's oversized. It's still fitting, but it's oversized, and was very popular in the 1940s and 50s and through the 60s, and certainly within Latino style, which always has had a specific aspect of style. This was an iconic piece. Well, it became associated with law enforcement sometimes as gang attire, even though it technically was not. Certainly, the more stylish Latinos would be men would be wearing this as a way to get out in the world and show their stuff. Certainly, the actos are important because they are a reflection of the politics of the time, and each one of them has its own deal. I would encourage you to check out El Teatro Campesino's website, in which they show you images from some of their actos, and you'll notice some imagery that has to do with issues within the culture, and of course it involves music and plays and things like this. Check it out. You can see what really started out as a project from an art student from college and became really a factor in society, not only in the theater world and in the movie world, but in a larger context in the political world, and how Luis Valdez has taken his activism and turned it into an industry that has had an impact on politics and society. All right. As usual, if you have any questions or comments or anything, send me an email at ingletguide@earthlink.net. And otherwise, I will see you on the web. Stay in touch.